Good afternoon, everyone. Just let, just wanted to say hello and I'll sit back, wait for people to join us here.
Bob, you're using Read AI. Couldn't hear you.
Sorry, I was muted. No, that's not me. I'm not sure who, I thought that was you, Sean. Looks like
Hold
there's
on,
two.
let me see. It might be me. Hold on.
It might be me. I have an app and I think it keeps logging into all my meetings. I can
Okay.
see if I can shut it off.
Is that Brian McCarter? Is that you?
Yeah, were you at the digital
Yes.
equity thing the other day?
Yes, that was, I thought that was you and I meant to make my way over and say hello, there,
Well,
but
nice to finally put a human face instead of a Zoom face to
yeah,
the
yeah,
name.
I had a big honking bandage on my face yesterday. It's a
Yep,
little smaller one today, but I had to leave that one on for 24 hours. I just had surgery the day before, but yeah, it was a pretty good
you
event.
left the stage.
Yeah. What's that? Okay. Um, so
Yeah,
yeah.
that was not me. The Read AI.
Oh, okay. All right. Um, so let's see. We'll give it another little bit to see who's going to join us here. I see some people from Dartmouth, New Bedford, Carl from Chelsea. This is 25. All right. We'll give it maybe one more minute.
Wait, now there are two of them in here. There's a fireflies.ai and then there's a Read AI.
Yeah, so I think it's two different people must have set that up. I don't know. And it's maybe Chris McClure from Watertown who sets up the Zoom links. Maybe he did that. I don't know. I don't think he's on right now. So possible he set something up, but I'm not sure. But okay, well, in the interest of everyone's time, maybe we should get going, and whoever joins us after, we can catch up with them. So, um, maybe just again, I know we do this every meeting, but just go around briefly introduce ourselves. I'm Bob Espindola from the town of Fairhaven, and I see it's RPS. That's Bob, right?
No,
Yes.
that's Rick Pierce.
Rick,
I'm from Somerset. I'm the selectman's representative to Serpent.
Yes, I know you've been with us a few times now, and then Bob Dwyer, right? Why don't you go ahead, Bob?
Hi, Bob Dwyer. I'm the chair of the Cable Internet Telecom Advisory Committee for Bourne, and I'm joined by Brian McCarter.
Okay, great. Hey, Brian. And Carl.
Good evening. Carl Allen. I'm a planner in the City of Chelsea, Department of Housing and Community Development.
All right. And I see Peter Chase.
Wait, yeah, Peter Chase from Dartmouth. Just on the broadband study committee, but an employee of the town.
All right. And Jonathan Nunes.
Hi, I'm the Assistant IT Director for the City of New Bedford.
All right, we'll stick with New Bedford, Sean Gross.
Hi, I'm Sean Gross. I'm the digital equity and broadband management consultant for New Bedford.
All right, and Felix Zayas. Did I say that correctly, Felix?
Yeah, that's right. Hi, Felix Ace from the Wilbraham Broadband Advisory Committee. Good to see you all again.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you were with us last month, I think, right? So, all right. So yeah, I don't know if anybody had any thoughts on additional items to talk about today, but I just thrown together first item I had was discussion about the Mass Broadband Institute and NDIA workshop that was held yesterday. And I know Brian was there, I was there. Was anybody else there? No.
Cloud Commission sent some representatives as well.
Oh, okay. And David Cole just joined us from Westport, right, David? Hi, David. And
Right.
yeah, so I think, to me, one of the big takeaways from that meeting yesterday were a couple announcements they made, and they are the workshop was geared for communities who already are working with consultants on a digital equity you know consulting effort. So Fairhaven is in that mode right now. I know Bourne is. I know there's a number of different communities that are doing that right now, and what they're gearing up for is a phase of funding that could be up to $100,000 per community. That would be and in before we get to that phase, they're saying that they are going to extend the times that the consultants that have been with the communities right now can spend with them. So they'll be able to kind of stay on for a little while longer to help them get from where they are in their digital equity plan to coming up with a formal plan to seek those funds and then execute a project. It's kind of how I understood it. Brian, is that kind of how you read that yesterday, that late announcement?
Yeah, I think it sounded like MBI hadn't finalized every I and T, but needed to, given the crowd that was there and who was directly related to their work, they rushed an announcement that this was coming, and it's like the ink's almost dry. And
Yeah.
so yeah, maybe put the bug in the ear of everyone who's already working on this in case you have to update everyone's digital equity report ever so slightly to dovetail into this next round of funding, since they said it's finding things that can be sustained or keep on going is an ongoing problem. And this is an attempt to band-aid that, since a lot of stuff's a one-off, and they're trying to keep the ball rolling effectively is what this grant is to do.
Yeah, the other big announcement was kind of in the negative direction, was the ACP program is, they're looking at a wind down right now, unless there's some intervention that happens between now and then. And they think the last full month is projected to be April. Could be, a little sooner, a little later, depending on, how things go. But they're recommending the NDIA representatives there anyways, we're recommending that people don't continue to advocate for people to sign on, because they would effectively be signing on by the time they actually start the process and get enrolled. There'd be maybe 1 month, or if at best 2 months of time. Or
Bob,
but go
the
ahead, Sean.
FCC has actually shut down the sign up
Oh, they have.
for ACP. So any eligible applicant can no longer sign up for the program.
Oh, okay. All right. So yesterday they didn't seem to know that was going to take place.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
it just happened.
Yeah,
But,
the FCC announced it about 2 weeks ago. I'm surprised I didn't know that.
Oh, okay.
So they said it was February, and they said strongly discourage everyone from applying. So potentially what it is there's still some paper apps in the mail or whatever, and they're closing any web form. Just stop it now.
Okay.
Yeah, that's probably right.
Okay. All right. So yeah, there were some great examples they had of communities that have been doing work in other parts of the country, setting up websites, to show everything that's available in their communities and, different programs kind of modeled after the like Tech Goes Home program that's up in the Boston area. And they, it's kind of, I don't know if there's any other highlights that you pulled off of that, Brian, that we should have mention for the group here, but they have a pretty good research
Sure.
page.
Sure. You started digging at them about speed testing and all that, and they shut down the conversation. So MBI still doesn't know how they're going to handle speed testing and the challenge process.
Yes, yes. So that's something that we definitely I think might be a good topic for when we have Gigi on with us next month. I don't, that's I think Sean Gross and I talked about that a little bit as one of the ideas potentially. And yeah, I don't know how different things are in other parts of the country, but that's
When you asked a question regarding speed test, what were they? I mean, were they just unwilling to even talk about it, or was it a
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
One of the
Okay.
things I highlighted, Sean, is actually the example that you followed that you put into place in New Bedford, where you went through the kids and in their Chromebooks that they were using at home to try and advocate for speed testing. And I whenever I run into anyone, I try to pass that along to them because I think it's just a great idea. And they Mass Broadband didn't say this, but the representative from NDIA, and they're out of the Midwest, I think Ohio is where they're from, but they do work nationally. But he said there was actually one of the states, just trying to see in my notes which one it was, actually had a program geared to doing something very similar to that on a statewide level. Michigan is
Michigan?
yeah, Michigan Moonshot is what
Yeah.
so if you look that up, there's a whole web page on Michigan Moonshot. And yeah, so it sounds like something that we might want to look into and advocate for. But yeah, it's I
Well,
wasn't
I mean, MBI defined the process in the BEAD announcement, or the BEAD plan rather, and the digital equity plan documents that they released in, I think it was December. And they outlined, several methodologies that would be acceptable as far as the challenge is concerned. I mean, not that we have to get into it now, and I think talking about it with Gigi is a good idea, but the timing is the greatest concern at this point regarding the fact that they're giving cities essentially 60 days from the time that they provide cities with all of the eligible broadband locations to when the cities can submit their challenges back. And that's a lot of work that needs to be done in 60 days might sound like a lot, but being a city that's already gone through this, there's a lot of legwork that needs to be done in advance. So that's a major concern, that at least that I have, that regardless of the process that any city uses, it's still going to take time to set up whatever you're doing if you want to submit challenges.
Okay. So aside from that concept of going through the schools, and the students in the schools, are there other models that communities are setting up for, to do that?
Yeah. I mean, that model, that top level is what I'd consider to be the fastest. Other models are basically where cities will share out a link to Ookla's speed test, and they'll ask individuals to run speed test and then take a screenshot and then submit it back. that's a harder one to implement, obviously. Then there are some where cities will actually contract with somebody like Ookla, and Ookla will set up a speed test server just for the city. And that link then is shared out with the public, and individuals within the public are encouraged to complete the speed test, and all those results then are coalesced inside of this one server's environment. So that's another method. The last one, which is the most difficult one to implement, is a model, excuse me, where you take if the Raspberry Pi like devices, you actually go into people's homes and you connect a Raspberry Pi device to their router. That device then is running a speed test based upon, let's say, 3-hour intervals or whatever the intervals are that you decide to set. And then those results are collected back on some type of a central server. But that implies you've got to get the individual in the household to agree to allowing you to come in and connect a Raspberry Pi device to their router. We've been trying to do that in New Bedford. And I will tell you, and Jonathan has been out there with me, trying to find volunteers to participate. Even when I was offering families up to $225 to participate, we were still having major difficulties getting families to agree to putting a device, connecting it to their router.
Yeah, they're worried about security, probably.
Yeah, and they're concerned that, hey, you're the government and you're connecting this device, to my router. I don't trust you. And, I understand exactly why they would have concern.
Yeah. So the second option that you mentioned seems like the most realistic one, getting the Ookla speed test with the sort of screenshots, but I mean, the other one you mentioned where they would the city would contract with Ookla for a dedicated server. I mean, that'd be nice, but I mean, these things, I mean, that option plus the one that you mentioned about the Raspberry devices, there's a financial aspect to that, right? Because somebody's going to come up with that money. Whereas the Ookla testing is no cost to anybody, right? It's just someone has to be willing to go onto the website and do
Right.
do the
Excuse
test,
me,
right?
that's right.
So, Sean, I kind
Thanks.
of have a question maybe
Yeah.
for you. So obviously the Raspberry Pi plugged into the router is the highest quality, whereas it's the most difficult to acquire that data, privacy concerns, physical hardware, a lot of pain, but for high quality data. Just doing, say, an Ookla speed test, that's just like a single snapshot in time. I'm not sure if you guys have the same issue down in New Bedford like we have in the Cape, where the more seasonal it is, the more spotty the service is. So it's more, it goes down randomly. And so that probably requires frequent speed testing. Is there like somewhere that's somewhere between the Raspberry Pi model where it's running it hardware based every few minutes, every few hours, versus a one moment in time snapshot? Do they have something that's somewhere in between?
Well, that's why, what are the model that we implemented in the past is a model that will be continuing to move forward for the challenge, and that is that we have agents that get installed on student Chromebooks, and just because students are so spread out across the city in just about every neighborhood, that allows us to be able to set the frequency from which the speed test is taken, and we don't accept a result, for example, from an individual location unless we get at least up to 7 tests from that site taken at different times of the day.
So I might need to make an introduction because I was due to some passport emergencies, had to talk to Marky's office and got talking to them about broadband, and they were asking about speed testing. So I'm going to make some email introductions to somebody over there that was asking. You know way too much about this. You might need to just tell it to the horse directly.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Can I ask what are you like? Are you asking people to test? Like, is there standards that you say, like when you go on Ookla, like, you know, physically plug a wire in, you must be using Windows 11, turn off your firewall for 30 seconds, or are you just saying any device anywhere in your house, just test it? Because I've seen, you know, 5 feet away in my living room, you get 240 megabits per second, and then 3 feet away, I get 107.
Yeah, so there's only so much that we can do to control what they do on their end.
Right.
And you know, this is the methodology that the FCC allowed to collect the data for the national broadband map. So you know, individuals could download, and you can do this, download the FCC's speed test, and those results then get passed back to the FCC for continuing to collect the data, you know, for the national broadband map. We do provide, you know, we have provided some instruction for families, and we indicate to them that, you know, we want them to be as close as possible to their router. We would prefer that they do it on a tablet or a computer. We'd also prefer, if possible, for there only to be one user that's using, you know, the computer for one test, and then for other tests, we want there, you know, want it to be a regular type of situation where, you know, however many number of family members use the internet connection in the house, you know, we want them to submit a result or results as well. So we, you know, we try to encourage a mixed bag, but there's, as you know, as I said at the beginning, there's only so much that we can control, and ultimately, you know, that's why the, you know, again, the concept of a student's Chromebook makes a lot of sense, because all that's doing is it's continuing to collect the data, you know, every, you know, in our case, we were having it collect every 4 hours. So we got, you know, conditions that allowed us to, you know, come up with an average, and we knew that that average accounted for all those various conditions that, you know, may have hampered the results, or may have actually provided better results.
Sean, this is Bob Dwyer. Let me ask you this. What is going to happen to the school-based speed testing during the purported challenge period of June 15th to July 15th, when the kids aren't in school and presumably they've turned their computers in?
So we've definitely thought about that, and I think that MBI thought about this as well, which was part of my concern, that they were running the speed test into the summer. There are still students that participate in summer learning programs, and you know, while our sample size would not be as significant, you know, we'd still have several hundred devices that would be spread throughout the community, in which we could collect those results. As we get closer and closer, I was hoping that if other cities were going to be utilizing some type of model like this, where, you know, I don't, you know, it might be school, cities or students, you know, any type of crowdsourcing effort, that, you know, we wanted to essentially let MBI know that, you know, this June timeframe, if possible, you know, give us time in May, when, you know, we have a larger sample size to work with, versus a smaller one. So yeah, I mean, I'm hoping to have conversations with Michael Baldino about this. But it would be much more helpful if there were other cities involved in the conversation, other than New Bedford, thanks. Other than New Bedford, to talk about this, because I mean, that's one issue. And then the other issue is this very small time window from which to gather the results. And I just think this is all by design, unfortunately. And that's why I think it's really important for us to work together, but also to have an advocate like Gigi, who can help talk about, you know, what's going on at the national level and what other states are doing, like Michigan, to more fairly and equally collect these results.
So this window between June 15th and July 15th is just a window for Massachusetts. This doesn't match the national requirements.
No, not at all. So the federal government, you know, has completed its round of the challenge process. And it's basically handed the responsibility now down to state broadband offices. And state broadband offices have at their discretion whether or not they will or will not accept challenges. Most states are accepting challenges. It's just that Massachusetts decided to, you know, implement this particular very, very narrow timeline. Whereas I do know in other states that it is a much larger time frame, like 3 months, that other states are allowing challenges and data collection to occur. Massachusetts is the only one that I've seen that's given this, you know, essentially 30-day period from which to gather the results, which is just, you know, extraordinarily challenging. Even if
Bob,
you're
write that
got all
down
the-
on your list of things to talk to Gigi Sloan about.
The timing, that's a 60-day timing,
Then 30-day timing, the narrowness of,
yeah,
sorry,
30
Sean, I
days,
had to
yeah.
interrupt.
30 days.
Had to interrupt.
Yes, I'm sorry. You're correct. You know, the other thing, and I'm looking at my notes from yesterday and wish I had taken better notes. And this may be something you're already familiar with, Sean, but Josh Eichen from MBI mentioned that there were four ways to challenge, and one was, you know, just basically the speed challenge on its own. The other was an area challenge where he said 6 or more locations in a census tract would essentially mean that the entire census tract was then considered underserved. And Brian, maybe you might remember what he said clearer than I do. And then he mentioned in MDUs, multi-dwelling units, that's 6. It was a similar thing where if you had 6 or more within a complex, then that would consider, you know, they'd all be considered underserved.
Yeah.
And then there was, DSL, which they said, you know, obviously anybody on DSL is just considered, for obvious reasons, they would meet the criteria. But did I
Your
describe
notes match, your notes exactly match mine, so you're got it exactly the way you said it.
Okay, so there's 6. The one I'm foggy on was the area challenge. There's 6 or more.
6 or more broadband serviceable locations within a census. Bob will remember which census. Is it block or tract?
The finest grain is the census block. Then there's the census block group, and the census block groups aggregate together to make a census tract. So I think it was the census block group. Okay.
Okay.
Kind of the intermediate level of detail.
And we have what, 5 of them in Bourne, for example, or
Right.
4 or 5 or something like that
Yeah.
of these.
Set 5 census block groups in Bourne, right, and across 2 census tracts, I think.
Okay, is that, are those details outlined on their website already, or is that something he just,
Yes, it's in the, if you take a look at the mass, the draft regulation,
it's in there
they
already?
mention, it's
Okay.
in there, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't want to,
Yeah, I've seen that.
okay, I
seen
didn't want to take us off on a tangent somewhere else that we didn't need to go, if you already understood that, but. so
Yeah, and we actually,
Understood, but hate it.
yeah,
Okay,
and we actually broke out some of the speed test results by census tracts. So that we could see exactly, how many locations within the census tract were either unserved or underserved based
Mhm.
upon the results that we were collecting. But yeah, I mean, I like the fact that they were using such low numbers, to get to that hurdle. It's just, again, the timing and Bob, to your point, or bringing up the the number 6 and the question related to if we're only dealing with summer learning students, since the numbers are so low, for an MDU or a census block, that is an encouraging sign. It's just you have to be ready to be able to have those plans in place.
Yeah.
okay.
Sean,
And
let me
just
just
a
get
question
back.
that. So I'm just gonna mention, because I mean, obviously the time frame of 30 days is a problem, but I'm thinking from a perspective of possibly Bourne, where they have more people come in during the summer months. It's gonna be high. It's probably better for their community, obviously, than us, Sean, where we're trying to focus on the school piece.
Oh, I think that any of the from a speed performance perspective for Bourne, with any students that are participating in summer learning, yeah, their results are going to be on the, from a speed performance perspective, they're going to be worse. But that only
We're just not gonna have
provides
enough summer students, so if you're, if in New Bedford, you got several hundred, at the same number, we were only looking at about 30 people in summer school. So it might be
Brian,
a lack of
we may
data.
have to extend this into the high school. I just don't see any way around that, but to get more numbers.
Yeah.
One possibility for us, and again, here on Cape Cod, we've got the seasonality issue, which is enormous. Bandwidth drops like a stone in the summer, and we need to capture that. And this overlap from June to July will in fact do that. One possibility is to just identify the students who test during the regular school year and test again in the summer, and just take a ratio and just show the ratio of that drop. By the way, with regard to the these $100,000 pop-up grants, for lack of a better term, that you guys heard about yesterday, I think that would be perfect if they can get it together quickly, for us to go and get a proposal together to hire somebody like Sean. We'd have to bid this, of course, to roll this out within our school very quickly, and maybe the other towns would like to do that too. I think that's something that's uniform, that I think MBI, I guess, given they're now looking at New Bedford's. You guys went for a gap network grant, didn't you?
Yes.
And you submitted these data, or the Chromebook data. They'll be very familiar with it, and they'll know the quality of the data, which appears to be tremendous. And if it's implemented in the same way in other school systems, they then get a good reading for the other towns as a basis for challenges, perhaps even area challenges.
Yeah.
Correct.
I think,
And this window's way too short too. You guys are nailing it on the head. Like MBI it's like cutting everyone equally bad. Like, okay, let's pick a date that's the most offensive to the most people. I mean, the most unhelpful time for all of us, and pick that. 30-day window in the summer. It's bad for you guys, and it's too short for us to gather the data with so few people.
so do you think there's any chance that if they heard from, I'm assuming that there's already been a lot of pushback on that timing that you're talking about, and that they just haven't budged. Is that correct? That comments that have been made already?
No, no.
No?
no.
Okay. So
I
there's,
mean, there have been comments made, but I don't think there's been enough of a push by multiple cities to band
Okay.
together and make some type of I don't know, stronger case together,
Okay.
versus a singular city coming in and saying, hey, we don't like the timing of this because of X.
Okay,
Um,
so this is an example where this group wants, to get together and use power in numbers and advocacy, and, someone drafts a letter, and we basically, all the communities, what we learned in I think it was our last meeting, that people felt like we didn't really need to have a formal structure and submit letters, as the coalition, but share concepts here, bring them back to your communities, ask for support from, select boards, city councils, and town administrators, whoever is the person that would authorize writing a letter on behalf of the community and sending that in, but we can always use kind of a template. And it sounds like if we're just, going after this one issue, it could be a very simple letter, right? Just that time is not long enough to adequately collect the data. And what would be a reasonable time if we were to ask for, something as an alternate to 30 days, would 90 days?
60, basically 60 days would be adequate. And if they were to allow for the process, say, to begin in May, like a May 1 until, if they wanted to bring, continue it into the summer, okay, fine. But as long as we got the first 30 days in May, I think that from the perspective of at least schools, will be in very good standing as a result. And that being told, at least from conversations that I've had privately with Josh, that Josh is amenable to such an approach.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good.
How are the other states that you see, Sean? Are they pretty much stick to that 60-day time frame? Are they trying to go 90 or?
Oh no, other states aren't running on such a short time frame for the challenge process. Other states, I think I mentioned earlier, have 3 months.
Yeah.
I think one of them is even longer. It's just like anytime you want to submit the data, just
Right,
do it.
Brian.
So
Yeah, it's
That's
just like
exactly
it's
right.
open now. Like you just
Right.
do whatever works for your community, because your community knows best about what's wrong in your community and when. Have fun.
And-
Exactly.
what is their justification for an end date and not having an open, ongoing process?
The justification that I've been told is the data needs to be within a certain time span, because carriers could be making changes to their network, and they want to be able to account for any changes that the carriers make, i.e., performance enhancements or upgrades to their network, as close to the time that they're going to be doling out the money.
They're just giving them as long as possible to go through their own network data, find the worst of the worst, and bring it up before anyone can check on them.
And that's
Yeah,
exactly what it is, Brian.
They're diesel
That's some
gating this, in other
BS.
words.
Yes, exactly, Bob.
Okay, so going back to if we were to advocate for something, should we advocate for 3 months though, still? I mean, the end date that was just the prior conversation, right?
So the problem I have with a date-driven challenge is it then precludes all the existing public data sets. So I don't think there should be a date restriction on when the data is at all. And this might be an extreme view, because then you can use the old Ookla data, you can use the MBI data from last summer, or whenever it was. And like, so by not advocating for a time restriction whatsoever, I think it gives the strongest possible play to do a challenge.
Brian, I agree with you 100%. And that's what I initially argued with Josh about, and Josh wasn't budging, but that was again only from one city's perspective. So I completely support the idea of a letter being drafted in which there is no date component, and then maybe it's, you know, something in between that Josh is willing to compromise on.
I'm might be an extremist and say this might be the one stickling point of BEAD that's so critical that we draw in the highest level politicians we can get. And this is if an issue is going to have to be forced through MBI, kicking and screaming, this might be it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there might be an opportunity to get some politicians that oversee MBI involved here.
So did MBI ever respond to the public comments on their BEAD draft?
No, I was
no.
able to get the NTIA submittal that was submitted after the comment period by going through the formal records request. So I can send that out. It's a very boring document. And so any changes, I guess, are buried in there somewhere, and it's very hard to read.
If anything changed at all. Yeah, I can tell you from my perspective that this whole process that MBI has set up has just caused me to give up on ever doing anything to allow me to access funds the way the program is now structured. That, you know, the population we're talking about in New Bedford, you know, you're doing great things and you have some of the same challenges that we have, but we don't have dedicated staff that can even think about these things. And the fact that MBI isn't out in these communities and doing the work and is basically pushing it off on volunteers to do is criminal.
Yeah, we agree that it is absolutely criminal, but I think from the city of New Bedford's perspective is that the community is relying upon the city to take this fight to the state, and that is what we're doing. And the federal government designed this program to ensure that infrastructure in communities where the infrastructure was inadequate, that's exactly what this money has been designed to do. And if the state broadband office or the representatives in it aren't doing this, well, then we're going to fight. And I think that, I mean, Carl, even in your case, if it's you don't have the staffing in place, just by being part of a group that's, you know, fighting, and your community adding its name to something, you know, just a letter, I think would be enough.
Oh, I'm willing to fight. I'm willing to go beyond a letter. You know, I wrote a kind of scathing 4-page critique of the whole BEAD process, and
Yeah.
I had actually hoped they would address some of the concerns I raised, but that's apparently beyond the pale.
Well, I guess, you know, maybe, Sean, it seems like in New Bedford, what you're doing is, you know, putting time and effort and resources into something that you hope will bear fruit in terms of grant funding. So you're you know, you're at risk that might not happen, but you're putting your best foot forward and hoping that I'm say you, meaning that this, the mayor and
The
staff.
mayor is, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that they feel this strongly enough that there's a good opportunity here, that it's worth, it's worth all that. But yeah, I can imagine there's many communities more like Chelsea that are finding it difficult to do that. So but the advocating for people to, take time to do a speed test, do a screenshot, send it in, as opposed to having to work all this through students with Chromebooks, which is ideal. But even that, isn't that a meaningful effort to, if you can get, a certain percentage of every community to do that? Is that,
Well, no, it's just literally taking an agent and installing an agent, working with the cities, or not the city, but the school district's IT office, and deploying the agent on top of the Chromebooks. I mean, that,
can they do that remotely? That's
yes,
Oh, yes.
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I see. Okay. So do the parents and the student have to, is there some sign off, or is it just,
No, because of and this is an issue that we look very much into, because of acceptable use policies that are written into every agreement with a student's device. The school is permitted to collect data off of that device. That
Okay.
doesn't mean that we didn't provide some level of documentation to families,
right?
because we did. But the acceptable use policy that the school has the parent sign off on permits the school to collect this and any type of diagnostic information from that device.
Okay. And they don't have to, the student does not have to actually do anything, that
Nothing.
this test.
Zero.
is
Turn the
happening.
computer on,
That's
What's
it.
that?
basically. Just turn the
Computer's on.
computer on.
Okay, as long as the computer's on, it happens. So, yeah, all right. Hearing that, I thought it was more involved. That's tremendous information. That could really, so every community has students with Chromebooks. This could be, done in, across the state. I mean, but
Well, that's exactly what other states are, and the model you talked about in Michigan, that's exactly what they were talking about. California is also considering doing the same thing.
okay. Do you think it gets to a point where, if this really happened that way, and it kind of dilutes your efforts? Like, so let's just say New Bedford comes up with great data, shows, hey, we're we're definitely in a situation where we need those funds. We demonstrated we can, we have areas that are underserved. And then, but if the same speed test is done throughout the state, and a lot of people, a lot of communities are finding the same thing, does that weaken your argument, or are you feeling like it's more that the inner cities are gonna, just by the nature of the beast and the
So we ran the analysis, and we looked at if MBI just took the money and contributed it towards the locations in the state based upon the current map of unserved and underserved communities, the number of individuals that are, first of all, the number of communities that would be receiving the money is minuscule, and then the number of people that would benefit from it is also a very tiny number. I don't have it up in front of me, but
Okay, yeah.
we did this analysis. In fact, Mayor Mitchell did this analysis. In looking at the amount of money that the state has, no, I don't feel concerned about this one bit. I think that money was set aside because the federal government anticipated what the need was, and the need is much greater than just the number of communities that MBI is claiming, are the only communities in the state. So, no, I mean,
I was kind of going the other direction, where if it was, if this was done universally across the state, you might end up with being so many cities that are in the same boat and demonstrate such a need that they don't then have the funds to do what they're, you know what I mean? That the funds are going to be spread a lot thinner in that regard. I'm only asking just to see if, you know, if that is, you know, a concern that we advocate for more and more communities to do what you're doing, and then it somehow works against the ones that are doing it already. But
Well, I mean, then the other way of looking at this is that this coalition, you know, tries to work together in an attempt versus trying to bring in, you know, the rest of the state into such a project.
right, yeah,
That's probably a better approach.
yeah. So Brian,
So
Brian has his hand up.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Sean, but I have a very different take on it, but we are in lockstep as far as this. I don't think it's going to matter because
Now, do I.
so in MBI's documents, they are expecting to have excess BEAD funding between GAP and BEAD. Their own statement is that we will have more like double what we need to serve everybody.
Yeah.
Secondly, one of their consultants who was green and fresh out of academia and had no filter slipped that MBI is expecting to take this excess and spend it all on digital equity initiatives instead of spending it on network construction. So potentially the red tape is put in place to intentionally burden us from accessing these funds so that it all goes to digital equity instead of actual construction. So
And
no, I
digital
don't
equity
think one
is-
town having better speed test data is going to even be a drop in the bucket because all of us are being left out to dry here.
I think, you know, en masse, if we get enough data to show that the original FCC maps or MBI's original estimation of what the unserved or undisturbed population is, I think what you would en masse, we could then say, look, the amount of money that we got, I forget how many million it is nowhere near enough to meet these needs. And then we go back to the congressional delegation and say, look, this program needs to be expanded. You know, that's something that is far beyond what was in the original budget. And that's probably a nationwide phenomenon or a nationwide conclusion.
Okay, and does that also work in terms of, because, you know, Massachusetts' share was not as high as some other states, you know, per capita wise, right?
Massachusetts numbers were pretty high. You know, for the capital projects fund, you know, that was something somewhere in the order of I think it was 160 million. And then on BEAD, you know, I don't have the number in front of me, but it was another, you know, $100+ million. So it's not like the city, or sorry, it's not like the state you know, has any type of in my opinion, and I say, you know, Brian, I hear you loud and clear. The state has enough money. And I heard the same thing, by the way, Brian, that the state was looking to reallocate those resources into more digital equity spending. And that's exactly what Maryland tried to do. And Maryland tried to take all the money and put it into giving laptops across the state. That was under the previous administration. The new governor came in and did away with that program and is now reshaping that program to focus more on infrastructure versus just giving away laptops.
Okay.
Well, you know, it's somewhat disingenuous, in part because the digital equity model that MBI and everyone else is pushing, you know, provides for 3 legs to the stool. There's literacy, there's devices, and there's access. And they're blatantly ignoring the access issues.
Exactly.
Well, why not? When you can make it look like you're being helpful and, you know, just pour a bunch of money into ACP and directly into overpriced internet's pocket and then turn around and buy some laptops and do some press releases versus a very, you know, hang wires. very boring, but it's a lasting solution. So, and it doesn't, hanging wires offends the telecom companies. So
That's
it's
exactly
logical
right.
how we ended up here, and we have to drag them kicking and screaming against everyone's interests.
I've got to drop. The one thing I was quickly going to say was, I've got documents regarding notifications that the carriers are sending home families that are recipients of the ACP program. I'll send them out to this group. I've got Spectrums, I have Comcast, and I have Verizon's, and they are very, very misleading. So I would encourage you in your communities, if you can, to somehow, let individuals know that are recipients of ACP, that when this program shuts down, that they are not going to be receiving any funds, because the carriers are making it out as if these families don't have to take any action. It's very, very misleading.
Oh.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, they
all right.
mentioned yesterday, they mentioned in the workshop that they would have to be I think three separate notifications within certain time frame to let people who are on the ACP program know that it'll be phased out. But interesting to know that it's not, just like enrolling in the program was cumbersome and difficult. They're going to make this part that way too.
Well, yeah, and none of these carriers want to be in a situation where they're losing subscribers, because Wall Street looks at the carriers from the perspective of the number of customers that they have. When the carriers begin to lose subscribers, that affects their stock price.
Oh.
They don't want to see that.
Good old dividend growth model being
Yeah,
half
exactly.
to 80% of the valuation of a stock. So as soon as you change trajectory, it has an amplifier effect in Wall Street.
Oh,
Correct.
you'd have to think that, logic would have it that this program, the ACP program, couldn't be carried on forever. It's just like it'd be a permanent subsidy, and that at some point you were going to gain all those new connections, and then at some point you're going to lose a good number of them at least. So I don't know if people weren't thinking that one through,
No.
but so all right, well,
Well, I forget what it's called, but they do have it for, legacy telephone service.
Yeah, that the Lifeline program.
Lifeline, yeah, right. They mentioned that yesterday too.
Yeah.
All
right, I'm gonna jump. I'll
okay,
catch up with you, Bob.
okay, all right,
Thanks,
thanks.
Sean.
Yeah, so I don't know, going through the rest of this list of things that we want to mention with Gigi. I don't know if anyone has any burning issues that they want to bring to the forefront with her. If this list is not good, or want to pull anything off of it or add anything to it, it'd be, but it might be helpful to working through David Eisenberg, who's coordinating the meeting with her, to be with us. Then it might be helpful to, give him a list of things that we'd like to talk about, just so she's prepared. He can pass those forward to her. But the
Bob?
other thing, go ahead.
Yeah, two other issues, and I only read your list very quickly. From the perspective of Cape Cod and maybe the Berkshires, maybe up around Rockport, Marblehead, the seasonality issue is a real problem. These systems, at least on Cape Cod, it was built 40 plus years ago, with a very narrow drinking straw pipeline, and the needs have expanded, and they're bad in most of the year, and then in the summer they're excruciating. So seasonality, and that has to apply to a lot of places that have a seasonal influx around the country. But just with MBI, that's the Massachusetts perspective. And then on Cape Cod, and I don't know about any of you who have had are now on Comcast, but Comcast bought out 20 odd years ago a decrepit old, it was then decrepit Adelphia system. And it's held together with spit and baling wire since then. And there are frequent outages. It only lasts a few seconds, but if you're in a Zoom call and you get cut off, you're gone. You've got to sign in again.
Right. So quality, what's the message that on the first one, I understand, it's a seasonality. On the second one, it's a quality issue, but what would be the question we would be asking her along those lines? Or just,
Well, in terms of any investment, out of the federal funds, especially for the legacy carriers, is upgrading their systems to the best that those networks can possibly hold. And with 75 ohm cable, there's a limit to that, but we're nowhere near what the current technology can push through. So we said that sent that off in a previous letter, but emphasizing that if we're going to get stuck with legacy systems and there's a reticence to overbuild a new system on top of that, in other words, to say let Verizon come in with FiOS on top of a Comcast system and then have that funded by grant money, then the incumbent has to be forced to go to the best that they can possibly push through there in terms of both capacity as well as the stability and dependability of what they put up on the poles.
okay. And are those issues that would be, become apparent with these speed tests in certain areas, like showing, quality issues in those areas that you're referring to more
Uh,
so than,
In
So
aggregate,
one
with
has to happen for the other, because right now, any overbuild, it's called, so if you're saying you already have connections and you're going over it, that's overbuild. So you have Comcast over already and you're building fiber on top of it under all the current rules, that's considered overbuild. If you are going over an area that already has it to reach an area that does not, it's not overbuild. And it's a thing that the lobbyists are always burying into every bill to avoid overbuild because they don't want anyone rolling into town with new technology and taking away their monopoly. So it's in every federal document and it really should not be there because it restricts these local movements from fixing problems that exist in your community.
okay, so that's an example of something we could ask her. Is there a way that groups locally and nationally could advocate for removing that language, any advice that she'd have on that? I don't know if that's the
Hmm.
right, phrasing of that, but so when it comes to, and I see a hand up, David, I just want to, just one quick question, just for, I'm trying to figure out if people will maybe show up to this, this meeting in person versus, a Zoom call. So she's going to be physically in town here, to meet with people, and I don't really want to, stay with that plan if we only think it's going to be me and her and maybe one or two other people. I'm hoping that we can at least have a showing of, a dozen or so people in person and then maybe others online. But are is anyone on this call thinking that they might, make the trip over here?
Bob, when and where exactly is the meeting? Because that conflicts with something else that we have going on in Bourne or
So
May.
if it happens to be with Gigi, it's been coordinated around everything that's going down the Cape. It's on the 14th at from 10 o'clock till noon time. And it's as of right now, it's going to be in Fairhaven. And so I have it on as 10 to noon, although she will only be there till 11:30. I just wanted to give ourselves a little time in case there was some follow-up discussion after she left. But yeah, that's the time frame. So, I
Mhm.
mean, so David, sounds like you might be willing to attend in person.
Well, I just
City
would
will
say
have
I
some
do
too.
plan to attend in person, but I also think that she has weighed in on the situation in Falmouth, where the municipal light plant initiative is being attacked by this mass priorities group. And I think we ought to try to see whether she has any ideas on what we can do to push back against these uh, um, opponents of municipal broadband that are being funded by undisclosed sources, but presumably by the internet service providers. And unfortunately, the guy who is leading that effort locally is a recent resident of Westport. And so and he's joined all kinds of committees here in town, Finance Committee among them. And my guess is he's done that to try to fight against our efforts to establish our own municipal light plant. So I think we've got a really serious problem. Falmouth is moving ahead, but I don't know whether other towns will have the kind of courage to march up against these folks who are weighing in this way.
Yeah, we
David,
heard,
don't you have some kind of a conflict of interest disclosure for any town committees?
Well, we do for the Finance Committee, but not for a lot of the others. And we don't really know, they aren't divulging who their sources of financing are.
Yeah,
Is that even
that-
legal?
They don't, they're the 501c4 organizations which don't have to disclose. And so it's, I think we ought to talk to her about this and see if she has any ideas as to
Yeah.
what we can do with it.
that's a great point there for sure, because if there's some way of finding out, you know, and publicizing that, I know Hampton, right? We heard from Hampton that they had that issue in their town meeting, and their project was missed narrowly by 4 votes, I think. It's a relatively small community, so I don't know how many votes there were overall, but still, within 4 votes is really unfortunate not to have been on the other side. So, and they had mailers going out in to the entire community, and kind of like a political ads type of thing. So, yeah, that's a good one for sure. So
Like, yeah, we'd be and love to attend the same meetings if the lawyers are trying to vet if this is legal, because we have an opening on our committee in Bourne, and Mass Priorities could just attempt to stuff someone.
right.
And if they can't, if we can't source their conflicts check, like it doesn't even seem legal. So
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, this is
As far as Bourne's participation, we're aware of 3 meetings. Bob, yours is on St. Valentine's Day in the morning, blessedly. Falmouth, I believe, is the night before, and we'll try to get one representative there. We have a big quarterly presentation to our select board that night. So I want most of my committee in the room then on the 13th, and then I don't know when the Hyannis meeting is, but we'll try to send somebody to that one too.
Okay, yeah, thanks for, yeah, it'd be great. I know that Sean seemed to think that New Bedford would be able to, at least a few people from New Bedford, and maybe, so I don't know, Jonathan, if you think there'd be people from New Bedford that might attend in person?
Yeah, we'll have a couple of us, at least 2 or 3.
Okay. All
at
right,
least, I would
Sean
say.
said he would be there, and then,
So yeah, him. Well,
how about Peter? Do you think might be some people from Dartmouth as well?
I think I'm going to try to attend. I don't know. Most of our committee has full-time jobs, so
Yeah,
I doubt
yeah.
they're going to be able to, but I will, I'll pass the word around. But
Okay,
I
yeah.
plan on trying to attend in person.
Okay, yeah, I'm kind of like, asking, local communities. Of course, if anyone wants to travel down here, even people coming from Bourne, that is a bit of a drive, so I know that, but I'm not asking.
Fairhaven is 25 miles, no worries.
Yeah, I went to school at Mass Maritime, so I'm pretty familiar with the drive, but yeah, if so, through email, I'll get the word out and try to get a sense, but it sounds like if we can pull together a reasonable group of 8 to 10 or 12 people that are here in person, that would be respectable and worthwhile to have her come in person. And then we'll open it up to people on the Zoom. So
I will try, Bob.
Okay.
Waze is now telling me it's an hour 50 minutes.
Yeah, depending on at least you'd be coming the opposite direction. Yesterday, we went to the Mass DOT building in Park Plaza. Left here about 10 after 7 and didn't get there till almost 10 o'clock yesterday morning. So but we were going the wrong direction there. Maybe you'd be coming the right direction. But I appreciate the the thought, and maybe be great if you could. So, all right, on the other things that were listed on here, so, well, it was lack of adequacy and accuracy of FCC maps, and what are other parts of the country doing? So we want to add to that certainly this 30-day window, and how that's going to hamper us here in Massachusetts. And the antitrust policies, just, I mean, that's just a big, broad, general concern that's underlying what everyone's involved with here. I don't know if there's anything specific that we should try to ask her about in that category, or in that anything there. Or, I mean, I don't want to send her a note saying, hey, we'd like to talk about this, if we don't have a a specific question in mind. The make ready legislation, that's something that's still ongoing, and that is, I guess other states are ahead of us there, but hopefully that'll come down the road. But I don't know if that's a topic for her.
Bob, real quick on One Touch Make Ready. The Cape Cod Technology Council Board tomorrow is considering letters to legislative delegation to endorse both the House and the Senate bill in Massachusetts. Massachusetts is the only state in New England that doesn't allow that. And you might want to obtain copies of that after from Steve Smith or Gene Curry, and then maybe just pile on afterwards and just circulate that for a possible letter of endorsement. I just sent off an email to say our board endorsed it today.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, that's good to know, because I know we talked about it as, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 months ago, and we thought that we would write a letter, and then it just, this kind of, my concern was that this group changes from week to week, and there are some that are paying attention, not attending meetings. They might watch meetings, but we don't have a formal voting process that and I don't want to write a letter that says, hey, we're 30 or 40 communities, that because some communities, just because they've attended, we're considering them members. But I don't want to speak on behalf that someone wasn't actually in the meeting and that we discussed this. So, but if we can distribute it to them like we did, and I think, the Bourne letter went out to people, and if communities wanted to, copy it and make it their own. And, but in this case, I think that'd be a good thing to do. So do we think it's worth talking to Gigi about that effort? See if she has any advice or not?
Again, that it's now legislative bills, so
kind of past that point. So
yeah,
okay.
exactly.
All right. Okay. Public-private partnerships, versus municipal ownership. The concern that we've heard, I know in Fairhaven and others probably have heard, is that, while some are considering, a public-private partnership where someone with deep pockets would build a system and own and operate it on behalf of the community, would get you the additional competition that you're looking for with at least one new provider. But there's a possibility that down the road they could then sell that back to the incumbent that's currently in place, and you'd be right back where you were from the beginning. So I know that's a concern in some communities, and how to deal with that. And maybe that's something that she might have some advice on, and how to possibly, if you do go down that path, what kind of language you can put in your contracts to make sure that doesn't happen. Or but all right, so we'll leave that one in. I know for some communities, there's been this, discussion about the model of municipal light plant versus enterprise fund, that's allowed in Massachusetts. Not sure if that's worth talking to her and find out what other parts of the country are doing and how they operate there.
Again, this whoever the sugar daddy is for mass priorities, they've been able to their campaigns have killed a number of MLP like cooperatives in other parts of the country. either by legislature or just attacking them municipality by municipality. So she probably knows about both that activity and also what's been successful in countering it. So
Okay.
that's a good thing to bring up. MLP again is mass specific, I think, but cooperatives are all over the country.
Oh, okay. So we'll highlight that as a cooperative as well. So that so they're going after, so if if an individual community has an enterprise fund that they're operating on, they're not going after that as much as they are a regional approach.
I don't know.
Yeah,
You know,
okay.
I think they'd go after any of them because it's essentially it's a duck under another name. So
Okay.
any small not-for-profit or government-owned or not, basically each of these groups is funded by a different ISP. And so I've had conversations with a few people that know who generally is behind certain ones of these. No one's identified which one is doing mass priorities yet, but there's another group in Western Mass that they're like, this one's Spectrum and this one's such and such. But each one of these is basically funded by a specific ISP.
What would we call those groups? We'd call them anti-broadband propaganda groups. Is that a good description?
Dark money slush funds. I don't know. We can. This is a Wendy question. How do we phrase this? We'll put a bug in Wendy's ear on what a derogatory term for these things should be.
by the way, if we had a common talking point and a common name, doppelganger for these things or name for these things, if we heard that over and over again, the press would pick that up, and anytime that somebody searched on that name as well as mass priorities, it'd come back to anything that any of us had put out in the public media.
Yeah. Interesting. So, all right. Well, I just wanted, she'll understand, we'll describe it well enough so she understand what we're talking about.
Mhm.
All right. So then, yeah, there's best practices and advocacy, I don't know, like we talk about just sharing things and then signing on within individual municipalities, but maybe she'll have some other ideas for us on that.
I don't know where she's from, but pointing out the uniqueness of the problems we have with New England town government always helps, because having lived in Maryland for 30 years, and I came from a county that had 750,000 people, and then moved to the town of Bourne with 20,000 people, and the government tried to do some of the same things and not well. The reduction in scale is incomprehensible to anybody south of the Mason-Dixon line. They cannot understand how we actually can function the way we do.
Okay.
So emphasizing the unique problems that New England towns specifically have.
Okay.
I think that is something that's enlightening to anybody who comes into the area.
Okay. And then the last thing I had was, her organization is called the American Association for Public Broadband. And it is to belong, there are dues that they collect for this. And I don't know. I mean, I figured just let her talk about what the benefits of that are. Obviously we as a coalition are not in a position to contribute funds for any kind of a membership, but perhaps there would be, one of the things I wanted to mention that when I went to the workshop yesterday, I had received a call prior to that from someone at MBI asking if I was going to be there, and I originally wasn't planning on going because I wasn't sure if I would be able to make it because I had the surgery just the day before. But she said, well, if you sign up and you can't make it, that's fine. But maybe if you're available, and you can go. But she said, we're going to be making some exciting announcements, which some of the ones I mentioned earlier. But one of the things she mentioned was regionalization opportunities. So, I specifically asked yesterday with this, this $100,000 grant opportunity that they have coming up, would they if communities were to band together and cooperatively work to submit an application, would that be seen there'd be a benefit there. And he said, Josh Eichen said that they would definitely see that as a favorable, if you work together and submit something, collectively.
Mhm.
So, I wasn't sure. Yeah, I mean, that's all digitally equity based. I'm thinking, one of the things that, it came to my mind when we're talking about regionalization here is that we've had a group down our way that we started talking about the studying public-private partnership between Dartmouth, Fairhaven, New Bedford, Mattapoisett, and then Westport had talked to us at one point, decided to do their own thing. But we talked about, potentially, getting, sitting down with private interests that would consider working with us, try to get some requests for proposals and so on, but we don't have funding to support, writing an RFP, going through the whole government procurement process. And, how would that work among, communities like that? So I had in mind that if we could get some kind of regional funding to help us do that type of thing, that might be helpful. I'm just not sure that, those funds that they're talking about would be allocated for something like what I'm talking about, because again, it's like what you're saying before, Brian, that we're going after infrastructure building and not necessarily digital equity work. So
Our
but
committee discussed exactly that problem and that solution today, believe
oh,
it
no
or not.
kidding. Really? And what was the outcome? Was there any suggestions?
Well, we're going to make a recommendation on the 13th to our select board that they perhaps talk to another agency, maybe a regional planning agency or something like that, to put one person in place to sit there to who's got the expertise to do that, funded by in Barnstable County, 15 towns contributing money to the Cape Cod Commission, for instance.
Oh, yeah. Oh, but so actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because so what I was referring to is if on a regional basis, our communities wanted to get together and write an RFP, we're not coordinated to do that, but individually, that is exactly one of the things that the town of Fairhaven is doing, working with our regional planning authority, SERPED, right now. They have funds that are available that originated from ARPA. A very simple process to just no like major application process or anything like that. They told us that they would work with us to help us generate a request for proposals for something that we would use for our own community. And it's going to be at no cost. So they will do that. And they have expertise in procurement and that type of thing. So, but what I was referring to is, how do we work with a group of communities together? And, and it seems like we would need some help from someone externally to guide that process and make sure that we, how do we write an intermunicipal agreement that we're all thinking this, what the outcome is going to be. We're all represented, appropriately. So, if you were dealing with a developer that you selected, they would probably help you coordinate all those, differences of opinions and but you have to get to a point where you feel comfortable selecting someone to work with. And that's the part I'm saying that's difficult to do without resources. But, yeah.
No,
but-
and how do we convince MBI that it's their job to facilitate these things and to do the hard work of what does intermunicipal agreements look like? How do you vet them through, kind of the Commonwealth's infrastructure? Are there regulatory changes that are needed? They should be on the forefront of this, not pushing it down to the communities.
Well, that's a good point. Maybe there's an opportunity for us to advocate to MBI to say, we need help with these things, and they're not digital equity issues, but that there's
No, they are. They're
Well,
just
some-
Absolutely.
redefining digital equity to be
well,
whatever
yeah.
they want to do.
Yeah, right. You're right. I guess you can apply these things to digital, right? You can apply this to digital equity projects. But once you form that structure, then you can also apply it to something that they might not consider a digital equity as well. So yeah, that's an interesting way to
They
look at it.
keep writing into the grants that like we are going to provide resources to towns to handle these things, and then we're like, great, and we turn around and ask them for the resources to handle these things, and we get Josh walking off the stage.
Yeah.
Yeah, they, one thing to emphasize with Gigi is we need to press the powers that be, the board or whatever, to make MBI a catalyst, not to just hand out the money, find the way to spread the federal money out as thin as possible, but to act as a catalyst to bring together public-private partnerships or whatever to make other things happen using this relatively small amount of federal money to attract businesses that want to invest, that can make money off of it. They ought to be the catalyst as opposed to just the defenders of Comcast and Verizon.
That's a great point. I like that, I mean, encourage, public-private partnerships and regionalization and that sort of thing. That could be, low cost, relatively low cost when you consider everything else that they're funding, right? And
Mhm.
it's doing the work up front to kind of study this and then help communities along to facilitate, maybe authorizing local planning authorities to help coordinate among communities within their RPA. So yeah, that's a good point. So the whole issue with the 30-day concern, it's if we wait, I mean, today's the 25th, the 14th is what, 3 weeks or so out from yesterday. So we're not going to try and make an effort to write any kind of letters or anything like that before we have her in, for that meeting, right? After that meeting, we'll have time, even though the June timeframe won't be that far away. I mean, May's even closer. If we were trying to advocate, as Sean suggested, for a May 1st start date, if we weren't successful with no restrictions, right? That's the first ask, right? There's no time limit, so you can go retroactive. But if that doesn't bear fruit, then the other suggestion is a May 1st start date. So we're already heading into February. So we have February, March, April. It's really 90 days. But I'm just saying, I'm trying to make sure I understand what the group is thinking that's on the call today, whether we should try to rush something out of a letter to MBI, or if we should just wait and
But Bob, I think one thing that would be worthwhile, and I don't know, you and Brian heard this better than, and I'm hearing it second and third hand, with these $100,000 grants in terms of digital equity, clearly identifying areas with digital equity is the highest priority. So there ought to be a way to either to get letters out very quickly or to get grants very quickly in place for parts of this 100,000 to do speed testing, etc.
So the tricky, because with MBI there's always a trick. The trick they left to this was that it has to be identified in your digital equity plan. So it needs to. So we were about to get our digital equity plan. It's about to be edited to make it more clear that speed testing is a problem, and in the recommendations, so that you can point to it and say, hey, with this grant we're going to get by right, they're in the line in the report from your municipal planning or whoever approved contractor says we need this.
Yeah,
Do it. So make sure you're in touch with them, and like if you know what you need to do, make sure it's in the report.
That's a good point, and we're same thing in Fairhaven. We're I think within the next couple of weeks, the consultant the town hired is going to be issuing a report. And now what I remembered hearing at the meeting yesterday was what they're planning on doing is allocating additional funds so that communities that are already working with a consultant on a digital equity planning process would be allowed to continue working with that same consultant. So they would extend additional funds to take your community from where you are now to being in a position to apply for those funds. So it'd be kind of like a gap here that they would fill between the original scope they had and now, taking you through to the point where you can actually apply for these $100,000 awards. And I wasn't sure, Brian, whether it meant it needs to be in that, plan, that further developed plan, or the one that we're now developing. But if you, it makes sense though, if it should be in anything that's written at any time, you put it in there now, and then it gets reemphasized when you have a further plan that puts together a specific project request.
From the horse's mouth, he said it has to be in the report for the municipal digital equity plan.
Okay, all right, that's exactly what he said. So
Yeah, so that's why I'm being emphatic. Make sure, if you know what the project needs to be, make sure your consultant adds it to the plan. Otherwise, everyone's going to have a problem accessing whatever the money is. Since the details haven't been all put on paper, some of it was verbal of how they're going to do it. He only put up. It seemed like they rushed it because everyone was going to be in the same room and they needed to present it today. So they didn't. They got it 98% of the way there, and they weren't ready to put the final thoughts on the paper.
Yeah, good point. I don't know how soon it'll be on their website officially, but sometimes even that, when they've posted things in the past, they've had to then further develop them. I don't think, so we'll see. But all right, if you notice anything being posted by them, just share it with the group. I'll do the same. I think kind of that's what we had on our agenda for today. I think if anyone has anything else you want to bring up, feel free right now. And otherwise, I think we can probably,
Just out of curiosity, one of the big things MBI is trying to do is to push out devices. They have, Tech Goes Home on a statewide contract to do training that ends in Chromebooks. We've been talking to them about replacing people's routers so that they're not paying the monthly service charge to Comcast for a piece of equipment that barely functions. So can we kind of frame something for them that if they're paying for and pushing out this hardware, that the hardware incorporate these speed tests? So just like, New Bedford was talking about for the school department, if we're pushing it out. And I think it's also important to not end speed testing when MBI's window closes, because we're going to have all of these carriers that are going to bend over backwards to make sure that there isn't a problem, and then go back to business as usual where they don't give a shit about their customers, and service is going to start declining. And we do need some kind of ongoing, almost permanent way of collecting metrics to show people what's actually happening on the ground.
Yeah, and I wonder, when Sean was talking about the option where a municipality could use the Ookla platform to, do something more specific than just the free service that you can, do a speed test on there with. I don't know if this has been discussed in the past, but why the state wouldn't,
buy it.
Right. Right. So that it could be it made available to everyone in the state to just utilize that, that tool,
I think Marky's office is interested in that concept, so I'm going to put an email together, just in a casual conversation, because I'm about to do some international travel, had to get an emergency appointment. And so we got talking about broadband with Marky's office, and they're like, we want to hear more about that speed testing issue. So.
Oh, good, great. Yeah, actually, I'm realizing that this is not an original thought that was in my head. It's from the last meeting we had. You mentioned that, right? Didn't you mention that in the last meeting, Brian, about that, why wouldn't the state fund something like that. I think.
I've been telling anyone who will listen, because
Yeah.
it's the most logical thing in the world. Like they have the access to the data. They've already licensed Ookla data. They could license seasonal Ookla data down to the month and figure out what they could, without us even having to challenge it. They could do it right now with the existing Ookla data with a wave of their pen.
So if that was implemented, what you're describing, it would not require an individual homeowner or business or anyone that's online to do any kind of testing of their own. Ookla just does it behind the scenes.
Yeah, they could already do it, and with the Microsoft speed test data, if they so, in their infinite wisdom, decided it was acceptable, they could do it right now.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
So
that's something that Gigi should advocate. We should advocate with Gigi and see how she can get them to put pressure on MBI.
Yeah, good point. And it might be like your approach of just going to politicians that they can have an influence on this, and having them put some pressure on MBI as well. But that's yeah. So I'm gonna hopefully you'll have someone from Bourne that'll have some of these thoughts in mind, because I want to make sure that we don't miss any opportunity to bring things up with her. But I'll put a note on there about Ookla and try to think about how to phrase that, and at least it'll be a placeholder for us to have the conversation with her, but get some advice. But all right.
I'll attempt to be there if possible. It's a little bit of a logistical challenge, but I will try my best to make
Yeah, and
it.
if anyone can't make it but is able to dial in and be on the Zoom call, that certainly is also very welcome. So and anything else anyone wants to bring up before we?
Can I raise a question?
Sure.
Because excuse me, my clock is chiming here, but
Okay.
the regional equity plan, they say try to get a regional group together, and that'll help with the process, but I can't get any concrete information as to what benefit it is going to be to try to get together with 2 or 3 other communities to start this digital equity planning. One, I know that Chelsea did the process, and they had 2 other communities work with them to do the preliminary portion of it. But then it appears to me that each of the communities comes up with their separate digital equity plan for their specific community. And so I can go to our Board of Selectmen and try to convince them that we should have a digital equity plan, but going to them and trying to convince them to work with 2 or 3 other communities in our area with all of the coordination and process and the time that it's going to require, I'm wondering what benefit do we really get by trying to get together. I've already reached out to one other community because the town planner there had expressed some interest in talking with other communities, but after I talked to him, I never heard back from him. And so I'm just wondering how much effort we should put into trying to bring a group of communities together rather than just go ahead and try to do our own individual equity and inclusion plan. Because I don't know.
It's 3 hours for the grant request. So just doing your own town, it's only about 3 hours to write the grant request to get your municipal planning agency to do what do we call it? The digital equity survey study. Mm-hmm. That's a 3-hour lift of just writing. And at least our town administrator was much more open to any of this, because the Cape Cod Commission's essentially a government, and they already have intergovernment contracts, given that they're like the regional planning authority. So the lift of the paperwork to have the regional planning authority handling it was much easier than, say, any other type of contract.
But they're handling the effort to. I think what Rick's referring to, though, is trying to explain to his community why they should work with other communities, and maybe Carl, you have an example.
Yeah. So Chelsea did it with Everett and Revere, largely on my insistence that the communities were not that different, that the residents of the three communities were suffering from the same problems, and that all of us sitting directly adjacent to Boston were kind of small fish, and that by banding together, any solution would have economies of scale which would make sense. It didn't work that way. All of the communities wanted, or at least, you know, I didn't care. I would have reported anything to our city council. But we don't have a mayor, and Revere and Everett do. And they wanted ownership of kind of a personalized report that they could take credit for. So we ended up with essentially 3 identical reports with a couple of pages and diagrams edited so that it only contained data specific to one of the 3 communities. But all of the conclusions and all of the analysis was the same. So that did make it easier. The next step, which is implementing a solution, so that came down. So our workforce board, which all 3 of us are part of, ours is Mass Hire Metro North. They organized an application to do the digital literacy part of digital equity and to do some of the device stuff that wasn't being done by Tech Goes Home, because MBI signed a statewide contract with Tech Goes Home to do that piece of it. But there are still other parts to the device work and hiring digital navigators, not just to educate, but to also help people troubleshoot their local environment. So Mass Hire kind of took on that umbrella for the 3 communities plus some other ones. And that left the access piece unaddressed. In an ideal world, I would, you know, kind of come up with a solution that was uniform across the 3 communities to address access and create a joint build out, a joint governance structure. The mayor of Everett, oh, we're recorded, so I should be careful what I say. You know, the mayor of Everett tends to do his own things. Revere just went through an election where they got a new mayor, so things are shaking out there. That form of regionalization is much harder than it ought to be. But if you have good working relationships with some adjacent towns that would allow you to look at the access piece in particular as a kind of combined effort, the economies of scale will make you a much more attractive customer. And
Customer
help
who?
whoever you go out to bid and create an access process through.
Oh, okay.
Talking about building out infrastructure?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't know if, if the plan, say you were going to be working on a project and you were going to utilize $100,000 worth of funding to do something in any area of the digital equity, then there may be, if that involved potentially having hiring someone that was going to work in this area, potentially you could share that resource among the communities for efficiency. I don't know if that's, the part of what you're getting at.
I have 700K that I need to spend this year on this, and that's going to be a drop in the bucket for what I need. 100K is like chump change.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
But for 700K, my current plan is to go out to bid and ask someone to develop a business plan that lays out a sustainable business model that can be deployed in phases and kind of gradually grow to encompass the entire city and give everyone access to high quality, low cost broadband. The business plan isn't going to cost 700K. So at the same time, I'm asking them to do, it'll probably be something like a 25% engineering design of what that phased build out would look like. And within that budget, to do a pilot, and they can tell me how big that pilot could be based upon the budget, and then I'll compare proposals based upon how much I get for 700K. In an ideal world, I would be doing that with Everett and Revere, but we're not in an ideal world.
So where did your 700K come from, Carl?
Community ARPA process.
Okay. ARPA. All right.
So we went through a process where we took a portion of the money we were allocated for ARPA, created a 20-person steering committee, and they voted on how they wanted to spend that money. And they allocated 705,000 to broadband.
Oh, wow. That's great. All right. Well, I don't know if that answered your question, Rick, or at least
Well,
give you-
yes, to some degree. I mean, I'm just a volunteer, and our town administrator has an awful lot on his plate. He's relatively new, and he wasn't really all that enthused about getting deeply involved in doing an equity and inclusion plan. And I think ours would focus more on devices and education rather than actual an effort to undertake a municipal broadband system right now, at least.
Yeah.
I'm
That's
thinking
okay.
more about trying to create a municipal loop, which I know the town of Swansea has already and Somerset doesn't. So that's another thing that I'd like to get some interest in. And
That's a good start. That's a good place to start. And there is a grant. I don't know if you're familiar with the Community Compact Cabinet Grant Program.
right.
Yeah, there's another round of that. That's how, well, the town of Fairhaven got some funding from that, but I know that some communities are using those grant funds to help build a municipal loop.
And the way Community Compact works is any regional approach or intermunicipal approach gets a lot of extra points.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So and that I think is opening up in February or March, and goes through April. So it's coming right up. It's a
Right.
good one to pay attention to. But all right.
Okay.
Anything else before we sign off? Okay, all right. I guess not then. Then thanks everyone for attending. Appreciate it. All righty. Have a
Thank
good
you
one.
all. Hopefully I'll get to see you all in person on Valentine's Day.
Oh, that'd be great. And we'll end early enough so that you can be home. For
Well, I got to
Valentine's.
get back for 3 o'clock.
Oh, yeah. All right.
meeting, so
All right. That would be great to see you in person. Thanks,
yeah,
everyone.
it'd
All
be
right.
good.
Bye.
Stay well. Bye.